Welcome to Regent Park TV News. My name is Denise.
And my name is Khadija. Regent Park is going through a massive redevelopment from a social housing community to a mixed-use and mixed-income neighborhood.
The development of Regent Park is managed by Toronto Community Housing.
In this episode of RPTV News, we feature a meeting updating the community on the redevelopment.
The meeting was held on February 18, 2019. In this meeting, we will hear about
the status of the newest buildings,
who the three shortlisted developers are,
and a discussion about community benefits.
With no further ado, to Kelly, who will present about the RFP.
Good evening, everyone. Just before I get into the updates on the RFP, I wanted to make one exciting announcement for TCHC. And that we just opened our third rental replacement building in Phase 3. As some of you are aware, Phase 3 is 10 city blocks. 6 of them are market blocks, 4 of them are TCHC rental replacement blocks. So what you have in front of you is the building we just opened in December, 150 River Street. It's 158 units in total. 125 of them are rent here to income replacement units for TCHC tenants who were moved off site as a result of the redevelopment. And we have an additional 33 units that are affordable rental. So we won't get into the details here. We did have a ribbon cutting in the middle of December, and we did give some tours of the building at that time. So I invite you to, if you know someone living in that building, to take a quick tour of the ground floor. We're pretty excited about the new space. I wanted to give you an update on the request for proposal process. We did commit to the community that we would come back to you at key intervals during the RFP process. TCHC, by way of history, issued a request for proposal to secure a developer partner for phases 4 and 5 in Regent Park. This RFP was issued because our contract with Daniels ends at the end of phase 3. As a public entity, we're required to engage in a fair and transparent procurement process. So to this end, we issued a 2-stage RFP process. The stage 1 is a qualification process of potential developer partners and how they would respond to the vision of the community. Stage 2 is the actual business proposal and community economic development plan. So what you see in front of you are the lands that we're talking about when we say phases 4 and 5. The yellow is phase 4, the red is phase 5. So they're the northernmost existing TCHC buildings that you will see on site that are just south of Gerrard Street. The RFP process started in 2018, and that's when we issued the stage 1 document. That's the RFVQ, or the vendor qualifications. The proponents that were shortlisted as part of this process were asked to respond to the stage 2, or the RFP process. And this was issued in the red arrow in April of 2019. TCHC staff evaluated those proposals in the early fall, which is the big green arrow, and that was followed by the community evaluation in early October of the 3 shortlisted developer partners' CED proposals. Since that time, we have been working on finalizing the evaluation process, which concluded at the end of the year. So that's where that takes us to today, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in the coming months. So in broad strokes, we expect that the developer partner will be selected this year, and then once they are selected, we can move forward on starting the work in phases 4 and 5. So what happens next? Well, we're in the green box called negotiations in February of 2020. We will be starting negotiations at the end of this month. We anticipate that the developers, the 3 shortlisted developers, will submit their final submissions in the spring. Our team will then evaluate those submissions in the summer, and we will be heading to the Toronto Community Housing Board of Directors for approval in the summertime. So at the end of the evaluation process that was completed at the end of last year, and as a result of your scoring from the October 5th community presentations, the following 3 developer partners have been shortlisted. So those 3 shortlisted developer opponents are Capital Developments Incorporated, the Daniels Corporation, and Tridal Builders. So those are the 3 that we will continue the negotiation process with. So this is just sort of a summary slide of how we've worked with the community to date. It's not in really any sort of order. We don't have the dates up there, but this just gives you a sense of the opportunities that we've had to speak with you and the input you've had. So we worked with folks at RPNA to strike an RFP procurement committee. It was actually their idea that they wanted to have a review of the RFP before we issued that. So we had a number of meetings with the procurement committee. We then struck a revitalization working group that geared up for the October 5th community presentations. Down at the bottom, we had some community conversations in the summer with folks that was summarized in a community conversations report and provided to the developers prior to the closing date. We've had some RFP informational open houses with the community. The revitalization working group then worked with the community to create vetted questions that were asked of the developers on the October 5th committee presentation date. So developer partner presentations, we saw over 200 attendees come attend, see the developer presentations, and evaluate the developers' presentations for community benefits. What happens next, after we have selected a developer partner, gone to our TCHC board, we will begin a community process around the community economic development or community benefits priorities that we want to see in Regent Park as part of phases 4 and 5. So that is sort of the high-level snapshot of where we've come, where we're at right now, and where we're heading. So just to be clear, we're hoping to have the developer selection process completed in the summertime so we can roll up our sleeves and start talking to you in more details about phases 4 and 5. Now, before we break into the open house format, we have a lot of agencies that are spending their evening with us, so I want to make sure we allow enough time for folks to go and visit those agencies, and also to bring your questions directly to key TCHC staff, depending on what issues or questions you may have. We do want to open up the floor to some questions for the next 20 or so minutes. So I'm going to ask, maybe by show of hands, if you could just put your hand up if you have a question. We have a question from Ishmael, right there. So we have 1, 2, 3. Lloyd is 4. Okay, let's do those 4 first in that order, if we may.
From our conversation, it seems highly challenging to get a community priorities and a community framework within 3 days. When you've given us small time, 11 days, we delivered. We gave you 4 months and you waited and you waited and you waited. So my question is this: can we finish those conversations? Because I feel like we've made a lot of headways. Can we get commitments from you to finish those conversations before you start your negotiations? Because it's not fair to us to give us 3 days and you're already setting up negotiations. So can we finish our community conversations first before you go into your negotiations? We want that commitment from you, because unless you do that, it's really, really unfair from your end to tell us, Ishmael and the whole community, we have 11 days, give us your priority. And then we give you 11 days, and then you wait 4 months, and then you tell us you have only 3 days. So I feel in 3 days, if we can negotiate, that's perfect. But if we cannot negotiate in these 3 days, can you give us more time? Just as you have not been giving us any time at all.
Just to clarify, we did speak with the Community Benefits Coalition that was led by Ishmael and Waleed, and included Saray and Inez and a host of other sort of community leaders. We did speak to you in October. We came back to you with a letter of intent of how we want to work with you and our commitments of how we would work with you, both with the community priorities and afterwards. So I just want to clarify that that happened. You felt that the community priorities were not well articulated in all of the documents that we had supplied to the developers as part of the RFP process. Because as a reminder, community priorities through the CED component of the RFP is very much a part of all of TCHC's RFPs for developer partners. We included the social development plan, the refresh social development plan, because that refresh document involved a year-long process of engaging with community on what their priorities were. We included some reporting that was done in the summer of 2019 about community conversations as well. So I just want to be clear on the documentations that went into the RFP and our conversations that were had in October. We did have conversations in October. We did provide you with an intent letter of how TCHC is committing to work with you. We did commit to using your community priorities report, providing it to the developer partners, which we did at the end of last year as part of the notice of shortlisting in its entirety. What we also talked about, and I can't get into any more details about this, what we also talked about is that we can't change the rules of the RFP midway through a public procurement process. So the way that we are evaluating community benefits or community economic development is already established in the RFP. We cannot make adjustments. Those rules are in place. We are very clear with proponents that we are not changing any of the rules because that would not be a fair and transparent process with them. So that's as much as I can say right now what we've done, because as you know, I can't disclose the types of information that we will be negotiating with in the coming months. But I wanted to confirm that yes, we have worked together. Yes, TCHC actually provided you with a letter of intent of how we would work with you and what we would do, and we have delivered on that. Now, I just want to get through to the next point about the timing. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's been a few months. From the middle of October when we received your priorities report to now is 4 months. We took a lot longer to complete the evaluation than we had planned. So between completing the evaluation and getting the notice of shortlisting out just prior to the holidays, it took significantly longer than we thought. We did reach out to you at the end of January to set up a meeting with RPNA to update them on the RFP process. And we met with you last week. So those are sort of the details on the timing. I agree with you. At the meeting last week, you said, Kelly, you should have come back to us in December, and you're absolutely right. We had intended to have a public meeting before we broke for the holiday season, but because we weren't completed the evaluation, we didn't want to go out to the community because we didn't have anything to report on, which is why we're reporting to you today. We should have issued a newsletter in December that just advised everybody of the extension on the evaluation period. So that is a point taken, Ishmael. It's an excellent one. We should have at least sent something out, and I take full ownership of that. We should have sent something out. We had crafted something. It was a very different newsletter because, again, we had intended to communicate all of this in December. And was there another point that I've missed?
Yes, the point was, given that we have 3 days, you said on Monday you'll be sitting with the developers to start negotiations.
That's correct.
Do you think 3 days would be enough to finish our conversations? Because when we send you the framework and the priorities report, we thought we were going to get feedback soon. We will sit, we will have tough conversations, but we'll have a common understanding. After we have those common understanding, then you'll move on to your negotiations. But you haven't contacted us, and we only have 3 days to finish off those conversations. Now, those conversations, let's say we're able to have a common understanding within 3 days. It's perfect that if you meet them on Monday. However, given our last meeting where We thought we were in the same picture, but it proved to be we were not. So what I'm saying is, if it proves to be the case that 3 days is not enough, will you give the community enough time? We've given you enough time. Will you give us enough time to finish those conversations and make sure, if things work out good, if they don't work out, you will extend the negotiations a little bit further so we can finalize our conversations. We could have done it in January, we could have done it in February, but you've waited till the end. And we cannot rush through this through the end. So I feel like we've given you enough time to do your work, and you've given us little time to do our work, but this time we need a good time to finish this conversation. So my question is, can you commit to us finishing our conversations first before you start your negotiations? Because if you don't do that, it's unfair to us.
So Ishmael, I'm quite confident that the meetings, when I reached out to you on Friday about setting up a meeting for this week and a second meeting also for this, I'm quite confident that we can come to terms on both the framework and the priorities report. I think the priorities report provides a good idea of where the community stands in its priorities. I do wish to remind everybody, there's this panic. I feel that there's a panic when we met, that you don't feel that you have enough time, but I want to remind you that in the RFP, TCHC gave 1 year after we sign on with a developer partner to formalize the arrangement for community benefits. Why did we establish a 1-year process? Because we wanted to give ample time for the community to speak to the developer and TCHC about what sort of flexibility there are in allocations, where the community priorities lay, and how to prioritize them, along with an evaluation and monitoring plan, because we all know that public reporting is important and how the community economic development and community benefits are spent. So that is what's happening in a 1-year process. I want to be clear. This is the beginning of the conversation and not the end. There is a panic that all of this has to be decided on before next week, and that's not the case. That's why we formalized it in the RFP, that we are beholden to the community in this 1-year process to articulate the plan for community benefits and a monitoring framework.
Last question, I swear I'll give it. If negotiations don't work till Friday, can you extend the deadline, just as we've extended the deadline many times for you?
Yeah!
Ishmael, this is the beginning of the conversation. I can't, I'll be honest with you, I'm gonna say no, and I will, sure, I'm gonna, sorry, Miguel. The answer is I can't extend the deadline. We can no, we have already made commitments to the developers to meet them next week. I can't disclose how I will use your community priorities report in the negotiation period, because that will contravene public procurement. That is part of the conversation that we committed to having this week. You gave us a bunch of homework. We're completing that homework. We're reporting back to you. I was very clear in my email that that is the key thing that we will talk about on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, whichever dates or both dates work for you. But I can't discuss how we're going to proceed here. But I will be clear, we are proceeding to start the negotiations next week with the developer partners.
Without the community conversation anymore.
I think Ishmael, we've sort of had these conversations before. I think after this week, you will feel confident that your question was answered, the key one. Okay? And that's about all I can say right now. I'm happy to work with you and happy to talk to you one-on-one.
I swear to you, I felt confident 4 months ago. No. I felt confident because you've assured me and have assured all the community members here that we're working on good faith.
Yeah.
And then 4 months later, you tell me we only have 3 days to finish off the conversation.
No.
All I'm asking for right now is after those 3 days, if we can finish the conversation in 3 days, great. If we cannot finish the conversation in 3 days, what next?
Okay, so what I was clear about back in October is we can't change the rules of the procurement process. When you talk about revising reports and giving them to develop, we can't change the rules of how we're going to evaluate, which is the key thing we talked about before. So I think if we can just roll up our sleeves, and if you look at the email that I sent you, I think on Thursday and Friday we're going to be working together. I'm quite confident that we can resolve
I think maybe the lack of clarity on what happens next. But I think for everybody else in the room that might be confused, these community conversations will happen over the course of a year once our partner is selected, so we can further clarify community priorities and make sure there is a widely engaged community that has input into this. It's the priorities, it's the framework, and it's the monitoring that are integral to ensuring that the rollout of these community priorities is done in a responsible way. So I'm going to end it right there for Ishmael's question. We're going to continue the conversation this week.
Quick question, I think. Can you tell me what the population of Regent Park was prior to Phase 1 back in 2005, 2006, and what your best guesstimate is for the population of this 69-acre redevelopment area after, say, Phases 4 and 5, and approximately what the ratio will be between market versus TCHC?
Sure, I can talk about that. I'll talk about units and population. TCHC, before Revite started, had 2,083 rental replacement units on site. That's the units. The number of people that lived here was probably double, 2.5, possibly 3 times that. What's happening at the end of Revite? TCHC has an obligation to replace all 2,083 rental replacement units. Some of those units have been replaced off-site in Phase 1 in 3 off-site buildings. We're also building about 400 new affordable rental units. So that's on top of the 2,083 rental replacement units. Added to that is about 5,500 market units that will be in place at the end of the Revite. So 5,500 market, 2,083 RGI, removing the off-site buildings, and about 400 affordable rental. Those are the units. So if you look at the number of units, it's going to be over probably close to 4 times the number of units that was there. I would say that the population will easily double. We know that folks living in the condos, their families may not be as large as TCHC units, but you're going to have at least a doubling of the population.
Good evening, everyone. I first of all want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I know I spoke to a lot of folks when I was knocking on doors and encouraging folks to show up today, because what I think is important for people to know is where we're at in a very important process in securing community benefits for our community. Okay, so one thing that I want people to take away from this conversation is how we have tried our very best to act with integrity, right? By making sure that folks in our community actually are aware of what those community benefits are and are able to actually participate. I see a lot of our neighbors here. Can you guys raise your hands? The ones who showed up to the community benefits meeting. Can you folks show up your hands? I see a bunch of people there, right? So there's a lot of folks who basically actually were participating. And what I want is I want Kelly to actually explain to us a very important point. And that is, when we started this journey on community benefits, there was actually a commitment made by not just Toronto Community Housing, but by folks who were involved in the process to involve the community. And they were actually supposed to help shortlist us from a list of 3 developers, shortlisted, correct? Folks came here on a Saturday, spent the entire day looking at presentations, looking at the commitments being made by these developers, participated in that, and basically you told us at the beginning of this meeting that we didn't shortlist anything. We basically moved from a list of 3 to a list of 3. That's not a shortlist, okay? So that's an important thing to acknowledge that you've done. The other thing is you talk a lot about accountability and transparency to the developers. What about accountability and transparency to the community? Yeah. Why not that? Right? Why are we spending this meeting justifying accountability and transparency for developers who've actually profited from real estate value increase from 2011 to 2000? Like, we had one person working at the city donate a $250,000 pocket change for him because of how much money was made from this community. And you folks are not willing to commit to prioritize what we want through a process that we went through together? We don't understand that. And I don't think anyone in this room is comfortable with walking away realizing that you are not willing to negotiate in good faith in support of a community priorities report because you've not signed on to it. And you're coming with edits at the last minute. This is what Ishmael has pointed to over and over again, which is we work in good faith. We come to the table. But what is the response? If you're not going to commit, you're not willing to commit to not moving forward with a negotiation process that is not informed by the community, then who are you negotiating on behalf of? Answer that question, please. And why has that list been 3? Why is it 3 before the process, and why is it 3 now? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the most recent question first. And I want to clarify some facts. When we invited the community on October 5th, it was to evaluate the shortlisted developers, their community economic development proposals. It was not to shortlist them. That was not your role. Your role was to evaluate the CED component. We then took your evaluation and our team's evaluation, and that's what created what we call a evaluation process, or we've been calling it shortlisting. So why is it not shortlisted? Typically, we intend to negotiate with top 2 ranked proponents, but in our RFP, we are very clear if the score of the 3rd ranked proponent is within 10% of the second highest scoring proponent, then the 3rd ranked proponent will also be invited to concurrent negotiations. So right now we have 3 strong candidates, and that's how we are proceeding. We're following the RFP rules. Secondly, I want to reiterate, Waleed, the 2 things that I said tonight that are pretty key. The first, we have taken your community priorities report, unedited, and provided it for information to the developer partners as we promised. We provided it as part of the notice of shortlisting, which is the first opportunity we had to introduce information as part of our procurement process. So I've already confirmed that we've done it. We have not edited it. We have not asked you for edits. In fact, you've asked us to do homework, which we are working on. Secondly, we have committed to working with the community. We've actually stated it in the RFP that we've asked for a flexibility in the allocation of direct investment funds by the developer, number 1. And number 2, we've committed the developer and TCHC to work with the community to establish the monitoring and evaluation framework and the plan for community benefits. So that is the continuing conversation about community priorities with the community. It is stated in our RFP, it's entrenched in the RFP.
So I'm just going to quickly say that we do understand that there's an RFP process and there are RFP rules that you have to follow, right? And there's a criteria by which you can follow that. What we're asking for is a commitment that you publicly, that you will work towards those priorities. One of the things that I think people need to know, and it's important for people to also understand, is when we're talking about community priorities, we're not only talking about spaces, we're talking about hard targets when it comes to employment. We're talking about hard targets when it comes to home ownership. We're talking about very specific things that we want a commitment that you, if you're going to be negotiating on our behalf in good faith, that you will commit to making sure that those are the bare minimum, right? And that's what we're asking for. Not just that we've shared the report to the developers, and they're going to look at it as part of the assessment, but we want to be assured that when you're going through the negotiation process, that you will act to push to make sure those priorities are met, if not exceeded. Thank you.
I'm just going to say another reiteration is I can't change the rules of the RFP. My evaluation rubric or framework cannot be changed. I intend to proceed with how we agreed to proceed, and I did provide the community priorities report to the developers in full, but I can't change the evaluation rubric, and I can't discuss any further how we will use the community priorities report, because we are in an active public procurement process. One of the proponents is in the room. It would contravene good practice to discuss how TCHC intends to negotiate publicly. I can't do that.
I don't have a question, it's a comment. I don't understand how Capital made it to the shortlist when they were the worst presentation in that day. So I don't understand how they made it. I'm just putting out there, it's really sad that it took this long, and for Capital to make it, I don't know how.
So I can't discuss any of the results of evaluation. This is a public procurement process, and it's an active one. So we are just past the 7 o'clock timeline that we promised, where we would open it up to the open house format. Myself, I will be up at the front with my team. If you have construction questions, development questions, we've had comments about market rate tenants. All of those can be directed up front to me and my team. If you have questions about construction management issues, noise, dust, that can also be directed to my team. If you're a TCHC tenant and you have a specific question or issue about your unit, you have a question about TCHC's new transfer policy that we discussed last fall, please direct it to operations, to Barry Thomas. If anybody has a question about affordable rental, the program there, the wait list, or relocation, please direct it to Massis on the relocation team.
So to my left, we have Kelly Skeeth, who is our development director for Toronto Community Housing. And we have Sam Maloney-Lee, who will be able to talk about tenant governance. We have Joyce Ho, who is our senior development manager. You can speak to her about development and the RFP. We have Murray, who can also speak to those points, associate development manager. And Eloise, who is our associate construction manager, and Anya as well, our associate construction manager. Robert will be able to also speak to construction concerns or issues that you may have. Over to my right, we have Barry Thomas, who is our assistant general manager for Central Region for Toronto Community Housing, and he'll be able to speak to maintenance issues and all the wonderful things that Barry knows how to talk to. And we have Likwa, who is our new manager for community sports and safety. And past Likwa, we have Massis, who is from the relocation team here in Regent Park. So if you have questions that are individual in the open house session at 7 o'clock, you can go around to folks at the tables and speak to those folks about the questions. And I also want to acknowledge all the great partners that we have in the room who have come out and are providing information about the resources and the opportunities that are in our community. So we have Pathways to Education, SEAS, Friends Helping People End Poverty. I see the Islamic Resource Center, Central Neighborhood House. There's also the Social Development Plan stakeholder table where you can find out how you can get involved with that. Over here we have the RPNA. So thank you everyone. Please enjoy the booths and enjoy the rest of your night.
My name is Lloyd Pike. I am the RPNA co-chair of the Regent Park Neighborhood Association. I come to the update meeting tonight to find out more information about what's happening with the Phase 4 and 5 and how we as in the community can continue to participate in the decision making. Tonight's meeting I think came a long ways, and we're looking forward to participating constantly and making sure that our residents of Regent Park get their voice heard within the decision making. I'm pretty satisfied with what was said tonight, but we'll wait and see in how the process goes, because people can say one thing and do something else. But I'm taking their word right now that they're going to have our voices heard, and they're going to be in the best interest of the residents of Regent Park for the next decisions that are coming along. So yes, I'm happy with tonight, and the turnout was really successful, and I just hope other people get involved and get their voices heard as well.
I'm not satisfied with the response from Toronto Community Housing until we have a signed framework, but also the priorities report will be used in the negotiations of the developers. They haven't gone far to commit to that, and I think it's important that they hear from you that they should negotiate in the best interest of the community by using the community priorities report and by committing to a community benefits agreement. So it's important for you to act by not just going to the Regent Park Coalition.ca website, but also reaching out to our city councillor, Christine Wong Tam, and also, Toronto Community Housing, specifically their CEO, which will have that information on our website. So we hope that you will get involved in our campaign. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ishmael Afra. I am the SDP Community Consultant, and I also volunteer with the Neighborhood Association. And I do a lot of work in the neighborhood as a community development worker as well. I think tonight's meeting was, the way it was prepared was to cut off the community's frustration, to cut off the community's conversation by structuring the meeting in a way where we become single individual people, as opposed to as a community asking a question or community having a conversation. The structure they created was do their presentations and then individual people to go to specific tables to get their answers, to get their questions answered. I think this sort of structure works if you just want to provide information to as many people as possible, but not if you want to have critical conversations about what's going on in the community. I think they could have done this type of meeting earlier so that people could have their questions answered, but not as the community front-facing update meeting. What I would say is that communities don't have a lot of time, to take benefit from what's happening in their neighborhoods. I think Regent Park, a lot of investments are coming to Regent Park, and I think the community has to be given the time and the energy and the resources it needs to think about this. I think TCHC is paying a huge attention to the developers and timelines they've created. I don't think they've given enough consideration to the community. Sometimes they do well, but most cases when it comes to the critical times, I think it's challenging for them to even live up to their own promises. And I feel the community needs to grow its strength to keep Toronto community housing in balance. And hopefully we can work together, but I think that can only come if we build trust. And in many ways, I feel Toronto community housing on critical times is breaking those trusts.
So at the community update open house that happened today, we presented the 3 shortlisted developers, and through the process, we made sure that residents were really heard. They attended and evaluated the 3 potential developers at the developer presentation back in October, and as a result of all the Regent Parkers' hard work on this process and their scoring, we were able to announce that all 3 developers will be moving forward with a shortlist. So the 3 developers that are being shortlisted are Capital Developments, the Daniels Corporation, and Tridel Builders. And so those 3 developers, as a result of the staff score and the community score, had a strong enough position that will be TCHC, Toronto Community Housing, will be negotiating with each of those 3 developers, and that puts us in a good position to negotiate with those 3 developers.
Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more information, follow us on all our social media platforms, and don't forget to visit our website as well as comment down below what you thought about this video.